Writing bass lines can be super fun. It can also be overwhelming because sometimes a bunch of different ideas could work and it's hard to choose what's the best idea. The goal, I think, is to try and come up with a bass line that is going to make the song become greater than the sum of its parts, right? So something that's going to tie all the layers together and make the music feel good. It might be something that's really simple. It might be something that's complicated. It might be clever. It might be pretty basic. But you have to decide and come up with the perfect thing that's going to make the music feel the best. So we have a lot of different tools that can help us do that. We're going to talk about some of those things today. And I think what we're going to do is I'm going to take a song idea that has a melody and chords and a beat, and we're going to come up with a bass line and try and come up with a bass line that's going to be the best line at making the music feel like a song. Okay, so if you're not sure where to start, always start by listening. Listen to all the music together, and then you can also start to listen to layers by themselves. So let's listen to the drums first. Okay, so it's a drum loop. It's got congas in there with the drums. Pretty punchy. It's got some attitude to it. The kick drum pattern, I always listen for the kick drum. So I'm hearing this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and kind of trying to find the heartbeat of the song. And a lot of times the kick drum pattern is going to tell you that heartbeat. So that's something that I want to be aware of. Something that I like to do as a bass player is a little exercise I call finding the groove with one note. And that's where I'm not even going to play a line yet. I'm just going to pick one note, and which I know the song is in D, so I'll just play a D note and try and come up with a pulse or a rhythm that's going to feel good with the song. Let's just mess around with just one note and see what happens. So here's our groove. It's the most basic. But maybe we could, that's kind of boring. Let's kind of try something a little punchier. Because the drums feel punchy, so I'm thinking shorter notes, right? A lot of times bass can feel super differently depending on your note duration. So let's try some punchier notes, and maybe I'll play around with the rhythm a little bit. Something like that could be kind of fun. And if you're not sure how I'm doing that, I'm using my left hand to mute the note, and I'm using ghost notes with my right hand. And the ghost note is when you just play the string while you're muting it with your left hand, and it can kind of give you this little rhythmic accent, which can kind of help lock with the drums. Something to try. Okay, so now we kind of have a little bit of an understanding of our drum feel. We're starting to experiment with different rhythmic patterns with just one note. Starting getting a feel for the attitude of the song. So let's just take that information and just kind of lock it away for a moment, and let's start to listen to the chords. Chords are just a group of notes, and at any given moment during a song, there might be something that I like to think of as the chord of the moment. And that's the combination of all of the notes being played together at the same time at a specific instance, right? And it might be a team effort. It might be the piano player is playing certain notes, the guitar player is playing certain notes, and the bass is playing a different note, and the melody might be on top. And all of those together are creating a chord in that moment. And as a bass player, I find it's really helpful to know all of the chords of the moment, or as much as you can, to know at any given moment what chord is being played, because that's going to determine a lot of things for me. That's going to determine the note choices that I'm going to make. And as a bass player, it can be really powerful because you can determine the chord of the moment based on what you put on the bottom of that chord. D major, C major over D, G major over D, D, D major again, C major over D, D6-ish, back to D. our first chord is D major. That's kind of our main chord of the key. You've got a D and an F sharp and an A in it. And then our next chord is a C major chord, so you have a C and an E and a G in it, but underneath that chord, the bottom note is still a D. Right? So that's a cool chord that the bass note is droning. The bass note is staying the same in this chord progression, which is really cool. It can be fun as a bass player to just play one note while all of the music is swirling around over top and you're holding it down on one note. And it can create this sort of hypnotic, cool feel in the music when the bass player doesn't change. So this chord progression is great for that. So we have this D major chord, which has got a D, an F sharp, and A in it. And then we go to C major. We've got a C, an E, and a G in it. And we still have the D in the bass. And then we're going to go to a G major chord, which is a G and a B and a D, and we keep that D in the bass, right? And then the progression repeats itself. It does the same thing. It does the D down to the C over D, and then this time we play sort of a D6 chord, which has got the way I played it is it had a D in the bottom, and then we played an A and a B in it. So it kind of sounds a little bit like the minor chord because it's got that B in it, which is our 6. And then back to D. So what you can do, and what I would encourage you to do with any song or any music that you're trying to come up with a bass line to, is to find all of those notes all over the neck. So for that first chord, I'm going to find those arpeggios in different places, and it's going to start to help me to map out the neck, and it's going to help me to know where on the neck you could play different ideas. So let's look at the melody. Okay, so it sounds goofy because it's in such a lower octave, but it's helpful to know the notes of the melody because it's telling us where the melody is moving, the rhythm of the melody. It's telling us where the holes in the melody are. I like to try and not do a lot of movement over the melody in a way that's distracting. It's telling us sort of the interval jumps. It's telling us sort of the attitude of the song. Because I think when you're playing music, when I'm playing bass, I think all of us, all of the musicians together, we should be there to serve that melody, to help ground that melody and to give it a foundation to sound great on top of. And by changing the groove or the chords or the bass line, all of those decisions that the band are making, we're making the melody feel a certain way. So it's important that we serve that melody with humility as musicians. We're trying to make it feel as good as possible. So by learning the melody, you are better informed to serve the melody. Now we've talked about our rhythm, we talked about our chords, we talked about our melody, and we can kind of take all of those pieces of information that we've distilled down and start to try and combine them together to try and come up with a bass line that's going to tie the music together in a cool way. Okay, so now that we have all that floating around in our heads, I'm just going to mess around and see what we can come up with. want to try to do is if we come up with some sort of intentional movement in between the holes in the melody, right? Because the melody has this ba-da-da-da-da, pause, ba-da-da, pause, doing it in between the movement, right? And maybe it could be cool. We learned our melody, so maybe doing some sort of call and response. Maybe quoting part of the melody, a lower octave, in that gap between the parts of the melody. That could be cool. This is the part where you have to make some decisions, right? And where it's like the devil's in the details. A lot of different things could work really well, but I think if we can find the right combination, it's going to make the music feel the best it can. And that's our responsibility as bass players. So I'm going to try and start to come up with something a little more specific. So the melody does a... So I like that. That's a nice little motif. And those are chord tones really nice because we're going 3, 4, 5 against that D. So maybe we'll play that 3, 4, 5 in the hole in the melody. Let's see what that feels like. 1, 2, here we go. I like how repetitive it is, a little hypnotic. I think, though, I want to change it a little bit. So maybe it's like the first time it's... And then the second time is something else. Maybe descending. So instead of... It could go... Nope, that sounds too majory. We could do major pentatonic. That could be nice. Let's see how that sounds. So it'll be like rhythmic groove, and then in the pause in the melody we'll go up 3, 4, 5, back to rhythmic groove, and then in the next pause in the melody we'll descend 1, 6, 5. Let's see how that feels. 1, 2, here we go. That's starting to feel good to me. I'm gonna see how that bass line sounds just with the drums. Let's listen to it. Sounds pretty good to me. Let's hear the bass line just with the chords. There's a little bit of rhythmic tension because the chords are pushed in times and the bass line isn't, but I think that's okay because the rhythm still feels good against the drums. Let's listen to the chords and the drums and the bass. So that's like an example of like, you don't need to be matchy-matchy all the time with everybody else. I think I like how it's playing with the melody. So now let's listen to it all together. I feel good about this. I think something that I'm noticing, I'm trying to do this instead of it's kind of muting it. These are these little detail things as a bass player, I think, making little decisions about your note duration, little decisions about your chord tones, little decisions about how you're complementing the kick drum pattern, little decisions about if you're going to lock with the rhythm of the chord change or not. All of these little tiny things, they make a difference. And as a bass player, I try to make really intentional decisions, right? Because it's like, I'm not going to do a lot here. I'm going to do just a few notes, but let's pick the best ones and put them at the best times to make the music feel the best it can. Some of these things maybe were confusing to you. That's okay. I actually have a bass course where we go really in depth on a lot of these concepts, where we talk about rhythm and chord tones and finding the groove with one note, and all of this stuff that we talked about today, we talk about a lot more in detail. Okay, so that's the lesson for today, but I'm going to put a little bonus for you. I'm going to take this song and I'm going to make a loop for a few minutes and remove my bass line, and then that way you can try for yourself. Maybe you can come up with a way cooler bass line than me, and hopefully it's a helpful little practice resource for you. So stay as long as you want. You can loop it. Have a good time, and I'll see you next week.